Hey guys, this is Tim from Lateral-G here, and I wanted to do a little more informal video installation here, kind of a step-by-step process on installing a complete air ride on my 1962 Cadillac limo that I'm going to be using RideTech with. So here is the car. It's a 1962 Cadillac limo. This is a Fleetwood 75 series, just an absolute tank of a car. And a few years ago, I went through this car. So it's now LS swapped, LQ4 with the 4L80E transmission. I put, and I went ahead and I kind of threw everything in the trunk here. So excuse the mess, but let me show you everything in the trunk here. So this is everything that I got from RideTech. So it has the shockwaves up here, and those are ingenious because they are the airbag and the shock all built in one. In the rear, it uses just like a more traditional convoluted bag with a separate shock that just goes in its standard location. So it's a real nice Fox RideTech shock that's made for air ride. So one of the things with air ride is you need a lot of rebound in it. This is backwards right now, but I wanted to show you this backwards because one of the things with air ride is you have to run a tank, a compressor, and valves, and it can get really sloppy really quickly. And with my setup on the Chevelle, it's kind of all hodgepodge together where I have stuff just shoved everywhere and everything. And you know, from the outside it looks really clean, but on the inside it's kind of messy. So what I wanted to show you is this guy here. So if I take this cover off, what you can see is this one is their 5-gallon tank with 2 compressors and all the valves. And what's nice about it is it's a nice, tight, clean package. You can't really see it, but down there you can kind of see some writing is the actual RidePro controller, the computer. So that's going to actually adjust all the valves for me. I mean, so basically what you're doing with this guy is you're mounting it down and you're connecting 4 airlines, which are going to be these ports here. And then, you know, like a hot and run and a ground. I mean, it's like, boom, simple, it's done. So probably the hardest part is finding somewhere to mount it. I'll go through this kit a little bit more and some of the parts a little bit more. But this is all the RidePro HP. So these guys actually are little like sensors that go up and down with the suspension, and it'll tell the computer where it's at in its travel, so it'll perfectly set the ride height every single time, which I'm really excited about. All right, so now I got the car up on jack stands, wheels removed, pretty basic. I'm going to show you a little bit about what's going on here. Pretty basic suspension. So there's that lower control arm that you can see right here, and then this is a strut rod here that goes up to this front cross member. You can kind of see it bolted through right there. So, and the steering linkage is on the back. So what I'm going to end up doing is pulling all this stuff apart. Usually what I'll do is get off the sway bar, get off the shock over there, and steering linkage, and then pop apart the ball joints. So there's pretty standard suspension. There's the steering linkage. Kind of see the coil spring in there a little better. Lower control arm a little better. So all this stuff was replaced a couple years ago when we did the CPP brake upgrade on it and everything. There's the strut rod I was talking about that goes to the front. So let me start pulling this apart. All right, so here's where we're at so far. So sway bar has been disconnected, steering linkage is disconnected, and the shock is removed. Now I backed off these nuts here. Well, it's pretty dark, but down here, smacked with a hammer, broke the spindle loose. So the next step is to put a floor jack underneath our lower control arm, put some weight on it, and get the coil spring out, which is always a little sketchy. All right, so I know it's really dark and hard to see now, but I ended up having to, got the spindle off, and then I ended up having to, that strut rod right there, I ended up loosening that up, so that was this arm to articulate a lot more. And I had already running these Jamco lowering springs, so they're not under any sort of tension, so I was able to just pull these guys right on out. So, all right, front suspension's off. We'll do the rear suspension here. Get the coil spring and the shock. That's about it. Well, all you gotta do here is pop off shock here and up top and lower the axle, and then these springs will pop right out. Just watch for your brake hoses here. So we got our jack lowered down and the rear suspension taken apart. So like I said, there's a 9/16 bolt or nut there at the top to pop the shock out. And then you lower down that axle. I said watch out for them brake lines. And well, we had Jamco lowering coils, so they already just kind of fell out. But basically it sits on there, and then there's like a little pocket with tabs up top there that it pops right out of. And that's kind of really it for the rear suspension. I know with the RideTech stuff we're going to have to remove this guy, but we'll show you that a little bit later. So for right now, at least the old is officially off, and we can trim up a few things and start putting back together. Shockwave, it's a shock airbag combo. In order to get this thing to fit in here, this lower bump for the coil spring, this guy here, is going to have to get taken off. So I'm actually have a Miller Spectrum 625 Extreme plasma cutter. So I'll be cutting this off, and I'll show you what that looks like. And then in the instructions it says on the upper pocket, pretty much this whole outside lip, so kind of you can see it's that pretty thick, maybe almost all the way out, all the way around, you have to trim out. So all this part here, which I don't know how you do it without a plasma cutter, but since I got a plasma cutter, that's what I'm going to use. So but that's pretty much it as far as modification, and that's just really for the clearance with the bag, to make sure that if there's any sort of interference, the bag touching anything, it will fail. And if there's no rubbing or anything on the bag, it'll last pretty much forever. So we definitely want to make sure we take our time and cut all this properly and get it out of the way so we don't have any issues. Here is that lower spring perch, has been plasma cutted off, and the upper, it's kind of hard to tell, but I actually trimmed that up quite a bit. That part of the frame is actually double thick, so you can kind of see these rivets up here. That's where two pieces of the frame have been riveted together, so it's ultra thick and strong there. Here's some of the pieces. They're still hot, so I'm not going to touch those, but it's probably 3/8 of an inch thick at that point. But you can kind of cut through one layer, then cut through the other, which is what I did initially. But big difference, a lot more clearance there for this airbag. So I'll end up test fitting it before I put all my tools away to make sure that I'm not going to have any sort of rubbing or anything. But that's it. So what I used was this guy right here, this Miller Spectrum 625 Extreme. Really handy dandy little plasma cutter that went right through that stuff like butter. So we'll go to the other side now. So we got the lower control arm plasma'd out and that spring bucket up there. So got a little excited. So I wanted to test fit this shockwave in here. So I just kind of have it sitting in here, not the proper, but you can see moves up and down and everything. So I'll get a floor jack in here, and right now, I mean, there's easily, it's a little tight there, maybe finger width part, but the rest of it's, got a lot of room in there. So I get a floor jack and kind of go through the range of motion on it and make sure that this bag isn't going to get anywhere near any of this metal. So just keep moving forward. All right, so this is the shockwave itself, which is the shock and the airbag combined for the front suspension. Now the top here, Goes through the factory shock mount bolt or hole. So it kind of goes right in there, like right there. So there's a little Torx bit here that you pop the cap right off and then slide this up into the frame. Take off this like upper plastic bushing and then this machine bushing too. And then here's the airline. So the airline actually just slides in there, and you can kind of see here, this guy goes up and down a little bit. So you pop it in there, and if you need to pop the airline out, you just push that collar down and then pull on the airline and it'll pop right out. All these are used in like trucks and stuff like that, so it's really, really reliable and you won't have any issues with it. The bottom here has kind of like a rod end, a bearing mount. And the instructions weren't super clear on how that goes together. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory, but I figured I'd just lay it out here. So I got this guy in already, but so basically you'll end up drilling out the lower control arm to a 5/8 inch to accept this nice big 5/8 inch grade 8 bolt. So then I did the bolt with the washer, then I used one of these plates, and this is all on the outside of the control arm. So it kind of goes like that. And then you slide this into the control arm. Now, what I did was, you want this mounted pretty much damn near in the middle of that control arm, so it won't rub up on against it or cause any sort of failure. So these are the spacers that go on either side. So it'll kind of sit there. So you kind of see here, like that. Well, that one doesn't want to stay on there, but and then this guy goes on the outside here. So, and that's on, and then on the other side, obviously, this guy goes like this. Sorry, I'm doing this with one hand. So this guy will go like that on the outside. And then, so that'll kind of get it centered right in the middle of that lower control arm. And then once you get the bolt through all those like 4 spacers plus the actual shockwave, then you go through the control arm, then another one of these plates on the outside, and then another washer and a lock nut on it. So what I did was I kind of got it all figured out and assembled here. So you can see the knob, the adjustment knob's not on there, but that's kind of how it looks on the top side. And I have my airline running out of there, and I'm actually going to do some sort of insulation on there or something, so that way I won't have any rubbing issues. And actually looking at it, I might just pop a hole in the top here and have it come out the top, but I kind of liked it out the side there because it's clean, and even when the control arm goes down, there's still tons of room there. But what I did was I got to put it all bolted together, got a floor jack in there, and let me crawl under here. I was looking at the clearance with the bag. Now, the bag doesn't really billow out. It's not like a balloon that just expands. It pretty much will retain this shape even when it's aired up. I mean, it might go out a little bit, but they're really good at retaining shape. But so there's no air in this bag, but this is it aired down all the way. So this would be all the way down. And you can kind of see, there's tons of room up here. It gets a little tight right here, but there's still well over a 1/4 inch of clearance, which is more than enough. Long as, like I said, long as nothing's rubbing or chafing or anything like that up against the bag, then these things will pretty much never fail. And so that's, take the time right now to inspect all that and make sure that you're not going to have any sort of rubbing, because if it rubs, it's going to fail and you're not going to have a good time. So, so you can kind of see the plate here, how it's orientated. And same thing on the other side here. So that's kind of the shockwave install in the front. So I'm going to do the other side, and then since I did the RidePro, I think it's XHP, the HP with the sensors. So once I get it, I got to put the spindle back on here and everything. And then I got to figure out where to mount those at. So I might mount it like here and have it go along the control arm or something like that. So figure that out. But for right now, I just was trying to get the shock waves actually mounted up in there. And so that's what we accomplished right now. So moving on. All right, really quick, I just want to show you. So I got this tightened up, and if I can kind of get in here, but you can see, sway bar is kind of getting in the way, but you can see how centered that shock wave is in there to where there's nice gaps. It's, you know, nothing's going to rub up against it. That's what you want. Just to where I said, even this, if this rubs through, you know, you're not going to lose your bag pressure, but you'll lose your shock, which would be just as bad, I guess. I mean, you won't be stranded on the side of the road, but yeah. So you can kind of see the spacers in there that I got going on. But yeah, there you go. All right, so I got the front pretty much done, so I want to show you the back. So first step right there is you got to remove the lower coil spring like hump gizmo. So this is it. You can kind of see where I just used an angle grinder, the cutoff wheel, and just cut the 4 little welds, and it popped off really easily. Actually, it's just kind of tack welded on there right there. So you got to remove that. And then on the spring pocket up top, you can see that hole that's fresh there in the middle. That one you got to drill out bigger to allow the all thread to go through. So I kind of started assembling this too. So there's the upper bucket, and it mounts with 2 nylock or nuts and everything. And then you have to install the actual airline fitting in there too, which I already did. So that pretty much goes up there. And then the bottom here, there's a plate that'll sit there. And there's a bolt, and there's a factory hole right there that'll go through that bottom control arm, through that plate, and then up into the bottom of the airbag. There's just a single hole right there. So I will show you that all together. I already went ahead and put in the shocks too, and they're just basically like a replacement shock, or meaning like they just bolt in the same way a factory one does. So it's kind of like a washer, the rubber grommet, the frame, rubber grommet, and then a washer, top and bottom. And I put them kind of, I guess, upside down, so to speak. So that way here on the bottom, I have the adjustment nut to where I can sit there and adjust them however I want. Because you could do it on the top, but it'd be pretty tight. You know, if the car's on the ground, hard to reach up there. Easy right now, but when it's on the ground, it'd be hard. So I got those in just so that way it hold the axle up and not stretch out my brake hose. So right now what I got to do is run the air hose from up there, and then give it some length and cut off some extra to where I can plumb the air line into that cup right there and get this all mounted up. Alright, so here's everything installed. So here's the bolt that goes through the factory hole. There's just a hole right there in the factory arms. Goes through the whole arm, through that plate, into the bottom of the bag. There's the bag itself, the upper cup here, which has the 2 bolts, and then the piece of all thread, and you can kind of see it poking through here. Now I ended up drilling a hole right here for the airline to go through, so I'll have to protect this because right now it's just sitting here, and I'll get like a rubber grommet to put on there to where it won't chafe it and cut the line or anything. But that's it for the rear. Just the 1 bolt there, and really the 1 bolt on the bottom, and then the shocks. Is about it. So on to the next side. Okay, so with all the airbags and shocks installed, our next task is to install these little sensors, and this basically will tell the computer where in the travel the suspension is at. Now this guy can only travel, this arm, only 90 degrees one way or the other. And physically it'll travel about 180 degrees, but 90 degrees is optimal. And you want it to travel as close to 90 as you can without going over. So the RideTech kit includes these little rods, which you can cut. So it's like a foot long that you can cut to fit. This is where we mounted it here, and then to the lower control arm. So basically what I ended up doing was with the floor jack, making the suspension go up and down a whole bunch, and on the other side I had the wheel on there while doing that to see where would clear. So basically the wheel doesn't hit it, nothing suspension wise hits it, and it's when it goes all the way up and down, it's close to 90 degrees as possible. So we'll do the other side, and then we got to move to the back. All right, so I got a little excited. I ended up putting the wheels back on, but I wanted to show you the sensors for the rear. So you can see it right there, mounted on like a bracket for the coil spring. and then it actually mounts right on the inside. So it kind of mounts on right next to the bracket where the coil spring would mount, and it mounts inside the rear lower trailing arm. So here is the reason for the airbag install. This is the car all laid out now. You can see it's way lower than it used to be. This is all the way down, so you really couldn't drive it this way. But I've driven it a little bit just around the block, and it rides really nice. But I definitely got to tune the shocks a little bit and everything. But I just kind of went in the middle, so I think there's 30 some odd clicks. So I just kind of went in the middle as a base point for it. Kind of show you what it looks like here in the trunk. I gotta still finish this part, but I'll show you. So that's, like I said, it's a mess in here still. There's kind of some janky wiring going on at the moment. But basically I already had the battery back here. So here's my ground for the computer, and here's my hot up here with the fuse. So those will kind of stay. I'm gonna put it in some painless performance power braid to make it look nice. This is the wire that needs to run up front for like a hot and run, but I was just excited to get it on the ground and kind of see what it looks like, so I just clamped it on there for right now. And I have the cover sitting inside, but again, I just wanted to get it on the ground. So it is bolted down right there to the floor, so you can see it doesn't take up a whole lot of room. I still got a ton of trunk space, but that's kind of how that all looks. And actually these compressors are really quiet when it's running. My little boy wants to go for a ride. Here's like the controller to make it all Bluetooth and everything fancy. So I'll probably mount that up, you know, somewhere nice and everything. So let me show you here. So in the rear, it sits about an inch off the frame from the ground. You can kind of see it there a little bit, but really, what's stopping it is the drive shafts hitting the rear, and in the front I believe just the shock waves are bottomed out. But you know, so I could do some modification to make those go lower, but then the transmission pan's gonna hit. So really, I mean, this is about as low as I'd want it to go without just starting to really start hacking and moving things around. And it is low though. It is super low. It looks good. The computer, I can't really show you that because I'm on my phone, but basically it Bluetooths to the it Bluetooths to my phone, so you can manually adjust to all four corners, or you can preset your ride heights like 1, 2, or 3. So like 1 would be all the way down, 2 would be ride height, 3 would be all the way up. And what's cool is this computer, every time you can program it so every time you fire up the car, it'll automatically go to position 2. So you can lay it out like this, and then, you know, hop in as soon as you hit that key and fire up, it'll go right back to position 2, perfect every time. You know, and this, you can do it 2 different ways. Is one, it'll go off of just air pressure alone, but since I installed those ride height sensors, yeah, hold on buddy, hold on. I installed those ride height sensors, then even if I loaded down the trunk and loaded people in it and everything, it's going to go perfect to that mark. And so I'm pretty excited about that, because I got a big family, so that's why we can all pile in here and it'll still ride good and sit at the right ride height every single time. So for more information or anything, there is a full article write-up on Lateral-G.net where I go a little more in depth, and there's pictures of everything. And for even more information, go on RideTech.com. Like I said, this is all their stuff. This is all RideTech bags, compressors, sensors, just everything is RideTech on this as far as the suspension stuff goes now to get it this low. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys learned something.